Hi everyone, welcome back to the Global Acceleration Programme. My name's Ruben, and as always, I'm here to remind us of where we are in our journey, to introduce you to your expert speaker for the day, and also, as always, to encourage your participation. We are live. You do have your very own experts at your fingertips, so please do ask questions as we go. The question button is below us on your screen, so click on that, ask the question you want, and I will facilitate the Q&A. I know we've got quite a lot of content today. There's an awful lot to talk about, but hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes, at least a couple of minutes available at the end to answer any questions you have. So please do post them as we go. So where are we on our Global Acceleration Programme journey? Well, excitingly, we are we're very nearly at the end. I suppose excitingly and slightly scarily as well, we're nearly at the end. We've been through phases 1, 2 and 3, so we know where we're going to export to. We've had the opportunity to think about how we refine and tweak both our proposition and our product so it's right for the markets we want to enter. And we've also last week looked at what we needed to do from an operational point of view to make sure all of the bits of the jigsaw are in place to enable us to deliver on our international ambitions, which brings us to the start of the fourth and final phase 4, where we get into the really good stuff. We get into thinking about what approach we're going to take to our marketing campaign in our new markets to ensure that we grab market share from the very off, making and make our international growth plan a huge and resounding success. As you can see, we've actually got 3 sessions in phase 4, the third of which is really an opportunity to bring all of the insights and expertise we've taken on board throughout our global acceleration program journey, and to put the final finishing touches to our export plan. After that is a really important key milestone where we'll all be having our individual meetings with our Google point of contact to have a look, to go through that export plan and to start putting it into practice. There will be a survey sent out after this session. So please do, if you haven't already diarised a time for that meeting, please do, as part of that survey, put in your preferred dates, because that's a really key moment where you look through your plan, and then, as you can see, immediately after that, the marketing test occurs, where you put your plan into action for the very first time to give you the opportunity to develop and refine it, so that by the time we get to peak, or at least planning for peak in September, you're in a really good place to take on board all of the insights and expertise we're going to add at that moment, so you can make the most of the opportunity in the holiday period. So that's what we've got. That's where we've been. That's what we've got to come. Let's very quickly remind ourselves of what phase 4 does look like, in particular, what today's session is all about. Later on this week, we are going to be talking about the kind of funds we're going to need to invest in order to make our strategy come to life, in order to make our plan successful, in order to meet our ambitious targets. But for today, it's going to be focusing very much on the approach we take to connecting with our audiences in our new markets, and connecting with them to the point whereby we are their preferred mode of purchasing the products we have. And to help us do exactly that, I'm delighted to introduce our expert speaker from today, Daniel, who's an integral part of the Google International Growth team. I will leave Daniel to introduce himself and then put us in his very, very capable and expert hands to take us through our marketing strategy approach. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Ruben, and hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. My name is Daniel, and I'm a senior account strategist at Google. In my role, I work with some of the fastest growing companies and startups, specifically for the Spanish market. And I'm also leading several initiatives that are basically trying to help clients like you accelerate your international growth. I'm really, really excited to be part of this great group of advertisers. I've heard so many stories about what you guys have been working on in the last few weeks, and very, very glad as well to share some of my experience with clients and learnings with you today. So for the agenda of today, we will cover three main blocks. The first one is going to be a review of marketing entry strategies, basically the core of the conversation today. But we will also dive a little bit deeper on the different products that Google Ads has in order to achieve these business goals and different tools for export. And finally, we will wrap up with a little bit of a very quick overview about how the different creatives and the different strategies for you to reach clients can influence purchase decisions across borders. In terms of goals for the session of today, what would be a success when we wrap up? There's mainly four goals, sorry. The first one is for you to define your marketing strategy. The second one, to discover a little bit more about as I was saying, the product, the ads that we have, the different products that we have for Google Ads. And lastly, to also help you build the best creatives that we can in order to influence the purchase decision of the users. And finally, as Ruben was mentioning in the beginning, for you to finish this export plan, this marketing plan, and to reach out to your Google POC in order to solve any of the questions that you might have after this session. Probably you will have a lot, but that's a good sign. That means that we've covered enough, and for you to reach out to the Google POC and activate it. So let's jump to the main area here, which is going to be the marketing entry strategies. And then we can dive a little bit deeper. So when we think about entering to a new market, there are mainly potentially two ways. There's many others, but mainly two ways that we can do it, depending on your business goal and your ambition. There is the accelerated approach that you can see on the left here, which is basically tailoring your marketing efforts in order to capture the demand as quickly as possible around certain events, around certain timelines. Basically, this is the sort of strategy that we will follow in this conversation, and the sort of strategy that we often also follow with our advertisers. Then there's also another approach which is valid, as we were saying, depending on the different goals that you might have, which is the gradual approach, which is basically trying to start with, let's say, a low profile in this sense for the internationalization in order to help you build certain capabilities and certain position in the market for you to succeed there. But as I said in the beginning, we're going to focus on an accelerated approach. We know most of you are interested in this approach. We know that you are capable. We know that you already have a strong position in many markets. So we think this is going to be the most interesting one. Regarding the accelerated approach, as you can see here, we propose you to think like a startup. And it might sound very googly in a way, right? But this is all about going quickly, using momentum, and using your brand in order to distinguish yourself from competitors. We can think about this way to enter the market accelerated in two phases mainly. There could be the early phase, where you're focused mainly on activation, capturing the demand early, focusing your marketing efforts at the bottom of the funnel, where you're going to see the most performance and the most return from investment. But also thinking about another phase, which actually comes really quickly because of this acceleration focus, where your brand will mature and you will start to focus, instead of growing very acceleratedly, as you can see in the graph, you will start focusing on maintaining the market share and the position, hopefully a very strong one, leading the market, by pushing your brand, by building a strong position, and by proposing to the client a very clear value proposition that can sustain this position over time, and then can create loyalty and therefore customer lifetime value over time. When it comes to doing this, because you're probably wondering, okay, it sounds great, Daniel, accelerated very quickly. How do I go about it, right? So we propose some what we call optimum marketing mixes. This is not something that Google is proposing. Actually, this is from the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, a very important organization. And here is sort of the optimum budget mix that we propose when we're entering a new market. As you can see, we focus, especially in the first years, big share, actually around 65% of the budget on activation, what we could call performance. But there is also around 1/3 that is suggested to be devoted to branding. And this is a conversation that I usually have with my clients, and it's a very tough one, right? You're going to a new market. Many of you go through this. your managers, bosses, CMOs are asking for performance and results as quickly as possible. And sometimes branding doesn't really fit into this, right? It's like, put this money here, you don't really know what's going to happen. But actually, and we're going to have this conversation during this session, this is very key to build a strong position, as we were saying before, for the future, when you're going to be able to sustain this leading position in the market over time. As you can see in the graph, in this sort of summary of 3 phases, this investment and this budget mix when it comes to brand grows over time. So even if you start from let's say a weaker position in terms of brand, and it makes sense, you still need to devote around 1/3 of your budget to brand. And over time, this share should increase, as should your recognition as a brand in this market. Here in the next chart, we bring a summary. I know it's full of content, but I think it's actually, when you go through it, probably we won't have that much time now, but when you have access to this content, I think it makes a lot of sense. This is sort of a summary about what you can expect and what you can do in the different phases. So think about this second column, entering the market. What sort of KPIs you should expect? For instance, very high CPCs, of course, because you're usually bidding for more generic keywords, low CTR, low share of voice, low conversions, low ROAS, because people don't know you. People might see an ad, but they don't know your brand, so they might click to another ad that sounds more familiar. So this is sort of what you should be expecting over time. You should expect better performance in terms of CTR, in terms of conversions, in terms of ROAS, but you should also expect decreasing CPCs, also because of the share of brand queries that you will be getting over time once you also start ramping up the investment on branding. We won't really go much in depth around each of the sections, but for you to keep in mind, it's basically, again, to start with a very strong investment on performance. But please bear in mind, it's not only performance that you can use when you're entering a new market. And this is a very important message. If you only go with performance, if you only go with generic keywords in a new market, it's going to be really, really, really difficult to escalate. And even if in the beginning it might be more profitable, in the medium run and in the long run, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to sustain this position and to grow. Here in the following slide, we have an example, and this is an approach that really works with some of our biggest clients. And actually, you'll find very similar tables in the workbooks that you have been sent. And basically, this is a summary about how you can go about budget, for instance, right? So we were talking about performance. This is only focused on performance. So let's say we're going to devote 60% of this performance budget to search campaigns and around 40% of this performance budget to shopping campaigns. So how do we decide a budget, for instance? One way that we can do that, very simple. We don't even need to go to the campaign level. It's okay. What's the goal that we have? Because sometimes, and I see this every day with my own clients, they put the budget first and then the business goal. Should actually be the other way around. How much do we expect to sell in this market? How much do we want to grow by accessing this new market? How much incremental sales can this market bring to us? And we can set a certain goal. It can be ambitious. It can be something that we are not 100% sure of, but this should be the first thing that we think about. How much sales do we want? How much leads do we need from this market? And for this example, let's say that we're aiming for 600 products sold over a certain period of time, let's say a month. And then we think about the cost per acquisition. In this case, we're using CPA because it's a bit simpler than ROAS, but you can do it as well with ROAS. And basically, how you can estimate the budget for your overall search campaigns investment would be to think about the CPC of your category. In this case, this is something that your account manager can provide to you, and this is information that you can access through your Google account managers. And that's also part of why you should get in touch with them. But let's say, for instance, for this specific example, the CPC of the category is around €1, and we are seeing a conversion rate on Google Analytics of around 2%. So we can estimate that the cost per acquisition for this segment, for this product line, would be around €50. So how do we go about the budget? If we're expecting 600 products sold and the CPA is around 50, then we should estimate a budget at around 30K for a month, for instance, for this market. It's the same procedure, it's the same process for the shopping campaigns. In this case, for instance, we're using a higher conversion rate on shopping, as it usually is the case. And then here, for instance, we would need a lower budget in order to achieve the same KPI of sales during the month. But we can go a little bit deeper in the following example, and it starts to get a bit messy, right? And here we can even go to the campaign level and think about it even more granularly. And here, for instance, if we think about generic keywords, we would stay the same. Most of the keywords, for instance, from this 600, right, that we are expecting to get, most of them, especially in the beginning, probably will come from generic keywords, not our brand, because it's the first time that we enter this market. Let's say 75% of them could come from generic keywords. And the CPC of the category, we already know, €1, conversion rate we know, etc. But here's when it starts to get tricky, for instance, because if we add a brand campaign, the CPC of this brand in a new market is probably very, very low. We're saying here that it could be 10 cents. It could be even less depending on the market. And the conversion rate for the brand campaign is probably much higher than the generic one. That's just how it works. So the CPA, for instance, in this case would go from 50 to around €10 for this example. And here what it means, and if you see the example, is when it starts to get interesting, because we were thinking about 30K as a budget for search in this market. But if we start to be a little bit more granular and we start thinking about branding, this is when we start to realize that actually the 22.5 and the 1,500 do not really add up to 30K, right? It's like, why is Daniel actually putting this here? Because brand is gonna enable you over time to free some budget that you can still reinvest, for instance, in a generic campaign or in another brand efforts or in other products. So this is also the message that we want to send, is that if you start investing on branding, the share of queries that will start coming from brand campaigns will grow. And although you need to put money on these brand campaigns, if you think about it overall, the results that you might be getting are actually worth the investing on brands. There's another example here for shopping, which is also interesting in the previous slide, actually, about the margins. There's not really need to go through it now, but it's really about you thinking also how to segment the campaigns depending on the different margins that they have for you as the product. Some products might provide you with 20% margin, some other products might provide you with more margin. So there's also a way that you can structure this, and we will go through this a little bit later. In the following slides, there's a summary about all of this reasoning that we were doing, right? About selecting a market, choosing a timeline. In this case, we were thinking about a month. The second step is estimating the CPA, this cost per acquisition, based on the average CPC of the category, which, as I said, it's an information that you can get from the International Growth Analyst Scorecard, or even ask your Google Account Manager if needed. And then you can also look into your e-commerce conversion rate on analytics as well, for you to have an idea about what the conversion rate might be. Of course, you should estimate a lower conversion rate in a new market. And once you have that, you just multiply the CPA times the number of sales, leads, or whatever business goal or KPI that you have, and then you should have a budget. This is basically a summary of what we have done. And then here we have an example for the fictional Happy Fitness company that you've been going through. And this would be, for instance, a very clear example about a company, right, that is trying to maximize their conversions, maximize their sales in an export market during the retail sales peak, like many of you will be very soon, growing, and to grow around 20% year over year. So, for instance, the strategy here could be around 70% of the budget devoted to performance for search and shopping, like the example that we were just seeing, and then maybe a 30% for re-engagement of these users on YouTube and other channels like Discovery. Here we could devote a budget, for instance, of 100K with 15% incremental over 6 months. And the main point here, and there's another summary that can be useful for you to have this conversation with your account manager, is again to think about this goal, about this business KPI, about how much growth you want to have over the next few months, how much sales would this growth require for you to grow 20%, how much incremental sales you would need, and then think about the associated investment that this would require based on the formulas that we have showed before. But let's dig a little bit deeper now on the second block about Google products and tools for export. We will go really quickly over search. Many of you are probably too familiar at this point about search, but we will also cover a little bit about shopping and YouTube as well, for you to have an idea about how to use them for export. So we're starting with search here, and then when it comes to the search campaigns, we should think about these three main topics, right? The new export markets, basically what you have selected for you to enter in this market, and think about also the feasibility, right? How much of a good choice they are. Think about the consumer behaviors. Think about how different data about the population might affect this performance, but also think about other areas such as the local nuances, which sometimes we forget about. What is the first language of the market? Which are the most common payment methods in these markets? Do we have them ready on our website? Or for instance, stuff like delivery preferences. There might be some markets where, I don't know, 1 out of 3 customers would not purchase because they don't have same-day delivery, right? You need to have this information. We will be able to provide it to you, but it is key for you to understand what are these preferences in the market that you are thinking about, for you to tailor your strategy to that specific market. And last but not least, regarding search marketing, there's also a very big importance around all of these factors for you to have a specific strategy for your marketing, how you structure the campaigns, how you manage them, how you target the creatives, as we will see later. It's key for this success. But let's dig a little bit deeper on the search part. So we will cover 3 main areas here: targeting and smart creatives, bidding, and measurement with the different attribution strategies. So regarding the targeting and smart creatives in the following slide, we actually see that we still have very complex account structures, right? Like you have seen them, some of you might have them, we see them every day. But this is honestly, like, this was very common in the past, even recommended by Google at some point to go very granular, but it is not the case anymore. There is a need to simplify the accounts for better performance, for the campaigns to have more data, and for the smart bidding strategies to work even better. So there's different things that you can do to simplify the accounts. The first one is to consolidate traffic, as I was saying, into fewer and larger ad groups and campaigns. Try to put things together instead of going with a campaign with 20 different ad groups. It might be possible for you to simplify it down to 5 or 4 or 5, and it's still okay. And even the performance that you'll get is probably better. The second point is to broaden match types. So basically, with the smart bidding and how these smart bidding strategies are evolving, there is no need anymore to be incredibly granular and incredibly exact and specific about the keywords. If you allow smart bidding to understand which customer will convert, you will probably increase your reach, increase your sales, and probably increase your performance altogether. And this is also going to help you maximize coverage as well, also with ads like dynamic search ads. And finally, as a recommendation, of course, you know this because there's actually no other way to create ads anymore, but to leverage responsive search ads as well, to tailor the creatives as much as possible to each of the customers. So regarding the consolidation of traffic that we were discussing, it is basically about simplifying. To go from manual bidding with very narrow strategies, very segmented, to as much simplification as possible for these strategies to have enough data and for these strategies to really succeed and work in your favor. It is not necessary anymore to have all of this structure that you can see here on the left. This is not necessary. This is not going to help your performance if you're on smart bidding. And actually, what is going to make more sense for you and in any new market that you open is to go as simple as possible and to simplify the campaigns as much as possible. Actually, the granularity, as you can see here in this example, creates frictions also, because sometimes, I mean, the purchase routes and the way that customers are converting into sales is becoming more complex every time. And the more touch points that we add to this process, if, for instance, we can see here in the example on the right, if there's, for instance, a campaign where we don't have enough budget, or a campaign where our CPC it's a bit lower than it should be, we might be breaking this process. We might be breaking this change toward this conversion, and we would have paid for the other two previous interactions. So it doesn't really make much sense to go about it with very granular CPC-based strategy. And this is applicable both for your domestic market to new markets. And why is it that it makes more sense to simplify? It's also because of the possibility to target, as I was saying before, broader match types with smart bidding. And this is incredibly useful also for you to reach new markets. Because probably sometimes when you go to a new market, you're thinking, how do I go about keywords? I might not speak the language, or even if I do, I might not be so fluent. How do we go about it? Actually, smart bidding in this case is here to help for you to go international and to go global. Because with broader match types, you're going to be able to cover many queries that you probably have not think about, that you probably sometimes might not even know about the language. And this way, you're going to be able to increase your coverage internationally. And in the third point that we were saying about this incremental reach, dynamic search ads are here to help as well. Basically, as you know, they cover all of the content from your website, and they're going to target based on these keywords that are present on the website. And this is actually going to help you also scale really quickly. And as you continue to improve the site, as you continue to improve the web, as you translate it, you're also going to increase the coverage that you have for these campaigns in the new market. Secondly, we're going to cover really quickly the performance-focused strategies for bidding. And here, where we're going to focus is on automation. As we were saying before, we are thinking about smart bidding as the future, but we're also thinking about it as the present, especially for clients who are willing to open new markets. We think about smart bidding as actually the best way to go to an international market. As we were saying before, you don't know the CPC in this market. We don't really understand the customer behaviors in this market, or even the coverage for keywords. So in this case, automation is here to help, and to have the right bid for the right client in the right moment for you to succeed, depending on the opportunity that these clients has. As you can see in this example, there might be some need to adjust. And in this case, what automation offers is a possibility to bid higher or lower, depending on the probability that this client will become an actual sale or a lead. But we know that we've covered this many times at Google. It makes sense that we do, because international markets are important, and sometimes they're very difficult to deal with. And there's also a need for you to leverage smart bidding in order to get to this point. In terms of automation, there's no way that CPC bidding can get there. And I still have a few clients, very little of them, but still some of them are still in manual bidding for all their campaigns, because sometimes it's not like manual bidding doesn't work at all. Like, it depends on the business objective, but there's no way that you can get to the same level of auction time signals that smart bidding has, like the location, the time of the day, is this person using a smartphone or a computer, what have they searched before, what browser are they using, which sort of apps do they have, like this. All of this information is gonna allow you to target the customers better, and to set a specific KPI, like the CPA that we were saying before, or a return on investment, and just set it up, set the keywords, and go for it. It's quickly, it's simple, and it is incredibly effective if you simplify the account structures. But how do we go about bidding strategies? Like, how do I go about them? Like, you know them already, but just to give a quick run through here. If you want visibility, because it might be necessary, especially for branding campaigns in the beginning, target outranking share might be the best strategy in this case, for you to set up, oh, I want to be the first one in 80% of the impression. This is what I want to be. I want to appear when they search for me. Great. This is the strategy to go. I want clicks. Let's go maximize clicks. I want conversions. But actually, for retailers like the ones that are present in this call, I think probably the strategy that at the moment makes more sense is to work with maximize conversion value and target ROAS, which is going to allow you to bid on profit and not just conversion volume, to take into account what is the return that these clients are providing us, and then bid based on this likelihood that the customer, for instance, will be very profitable for us. So let's say a customer that has a likelihood to invest to pay 200 euros for 2 or 3 products, we will pay more for this client than a client that maybe is interested in a product worth 50 euros. So you adapt the strategy based on this profitability. And this is something that sounds incredibly magical in a way, but it works really efficiently if you scale it with volume and you simplify structures. For the following part, this might not be especially applicable for most of our clients, but we know that some of you still gather some leads, still gather some emails for you to do email marketing and stuff like that, subscriptions and stuff. So we also know that there is a very, very big importance on improving lead quality and volume. And this is also where smart bidding is going to come to hand if you also implement it with offline conversion tracking and other strategies that we have at Google, for you not to just measure when you get in a lead, but you also measure what happens at the end of this process with the lead, right? And this is where you feed this information back to the Google Ads console. And then it's when it starts to become a really, really incredibly powerful tool for you to work with lead gen collection. And this is also something that we hear very often, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, this new market is not working. It doesn't convert. What is going on? But it is also something that we need to think about, is that it is possible that this market is not converting in the way that we are currently measuring, right? So we also need to be very mindful about the complexity and to really, really understand how we are delivering on the promise that we are making to customers. So for instance, if we're thinking about sales and discounts and delivery times and stuff like that, we should be able to communicate a very clear message that aligns really well with the delivery that we are getting and the times, products, quality that we are getting in this market. For the following one, we can jump quickly to measurement, and this is also very connected to the simplification of the strategies, and we can come back to this graph that we were saying before, right? The customer routes and conversion paths are becoming increasingly complex with many different touch points over time. The sale doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes it does, but unfortunately, it takes a little bit of reflection time from customers. So this is also where attribution, which is sometimes also very, very hard conversation to have, and it's complex, many different platforms, many different channels. But this is also that it is very important that we understand that it is very rare that a person takes action on your website just after one search query. Probably very few people in this call do that. We should not expect our customers to do that either. So there will be naturally many different touch points. And we can see in the next slide, around 90% of the people switch between screens to complete tasks, and even around 40%, 38 actually, of the customer journeys involve more than one channel of interaction. So this gets fragmented, this gets complex. And if we think about it, there's actually two ways that we can go about this. We can go about this with the data-driven strategy. So basically, based on the different contexts that we have over time about these touch points that we were mentioning, we will attribute the credit. So let's say 1 unit of conversion, we might get 0.2 to one contact, the initial one. We might get 0.2 to the second one, and we might get the rest to the last one, right? Depending on the importance of each of these touch points, depending on how much relevance they played in the conversion path. And there's also another way to go about it, which we don't cover in depth now, but it is basically fixed static rules, so rules-based, to assign credit to different touch points. But before we jump to the shopping section, because I know we cover a lot of content for search, I think that we have a question here. There's a question about Google moving from modified broad match, yes, to just phrase match. Indeed, the reason, basically, If you haven't received the communication, you probably have. But broad match modified BMM has already been removed, and the behavior from this match strategy has been integrated around 99.99 of the cases. There are some exceptions, but most of them basically into phrase match. And why this happened is also, again, in a path to simplify, to make it easier also for clients to deliver on their business goals, and for you to also cover as much queries as possible. So the way this is evolving, I'm not anticipating any change this year, but as you can probably imagine, the way that this will evolve over time is to go broader and then to rely more and more and more on smart bidding for the system to automatically choose which queries among all of these broad match and phrase match that will be available will be the most suitable. So this is sort of the path that we're moving forward. It might take years, might take a few months, not really sure, and I don't think I can comment on that. But we're moving toward broader match keywords, and we're also leveraging smart bidding more and more and more. Not because Google wants that for any reason, but because we see that the clients get better results with that, and therefore they grow their businesses and they succeed, both domestically and internationally. So we can jump now to the export shopping section really quickly, because I think we're a little bit behind time. Export and shopping is a key element for international growth and expansion, as we were seeing before in the example. It's definitely a very good way to increase the performance, and it's a very good tool to grow your numbers and your sales. We know that in the domestic markets, no difference for export. And there's different ways that you can do it, and that you can make basically your shopping campaigns export ready. There's 3 takeaways here for you to keep in mind. Basically, build the feed, structure it properly, prepare the landing page as well for you to not have any issues. I've seen it sometimes, right? There's some mismatch sometimes in the language between the feed and the landing page, these sort of things. You can create issues. Keep in mind also having the landing page ready, and also follow the best practices that you have already been shared many times, but your account manager can also share again about structures and about bidding through profitability, for instance. How can you go about it more specifically? Duplicate an existing feed, for instance, and decide if you want to sell all of the products that you're selling in your home market, for instance, your domestic market, or maybe you just want to sell to this new export market a specific subset of products. Think also about matching the language. Again, as we mentioned, super key, because sometimes it sounds very intuitive, but we forget about it. Match the language of the export market and localize the feed to this market. And then finally, which sounds very intuitive again, but sometimes we forget about it, to match the currency of the export market as well in the Google currency conversion tool. How can you prepare your landing page? As we were saying, it's the second step. Basically, think about disable IP detection in this case to have a consistent experience in every market. Match the language of the export market again, it's a key. And again, match the currency of the export market in your website. It would be a shame if we brought a potential client right to the website, and then when they're about to pay, I don't know, they might be in the UK, for instance, and they might see the currency in euros. This might cause an issue for conversions, and it would be a shame that these small details end up being an issue for getting that final sales through the process. And last but not least for export, a lot of advice here condensed in a few slides, but think about automation again as a way to grow and as a way to expand your coverage and expand your sales. Also think about the price and putting promotion up front. There's some advice here about discounts, for instance, because this is also going to help CTR and sales volume a lot. And then one very big advice, and this is actually key for your conversation with your account manager in the next few days, is to also test before the sales peak. So it is key that these shopping campaigns have already been tested weeks before the sales peak comes, so they are ready for when we need to actually adjust them and launch and grow the campaigns. And last, moving to the export YouTube section, we will just mention a few stats and a few resources because we don't really have that much time. But for you to keep in mind, there's two figures here that I would keep in mind. Basically, around half of the people, when they search a product on Google, they go to YouTube to learn more about this product. Think about reviews, think about unboxing videos, think about people testing the product and giving their opinions. It's incredibly important to be present there. That's where the eyes are, especially after the last months of pandemic. We have seen an increase in usage of YouTube that has been massive. And this is a platform that is going to enable you to reach the people where they are, basically. And another stat that is also very key is that around 40% of people say that they have purchased products that they have discovered on YouTube. So this gives you an idea about the opportunity that exists there. We won't cover all of the video types that there are on YouTube and how can you go about it. We're going to just give you in the next slide 3 main takeaways for you to keep in mind for the conversation with your account managers. First, if you don't have video creatives yet, which might be the case for many of you, or maybe you have them in one language, but you don't have them for this new market, whatever the challenge is, there's 3 different resources that you can rely on to get there and to use YouTube as a way to expand your international growth in this new market. First, the Video Builder Beta, which is basically going to enable you to create new videos, to cut them, to edit them. It's an incredible tool. It's a beta still, but you can request it to your account manager for you to have access. If you need something more professional, more advanced, you're going to go really serious with this. We have an internal team at Google, the Google Creative Services team, which is going to enable you to, it's basically actually going to deliver a high quality video following Google's best practices based on video materials and a script that you send to this team. So you basically can tell the team, hey, I want to make a video with this recording that I have here, with these few files, with these messages. How can I go about it? How can I make it successful on YouTube? How can I turn this into a video that follows best practices? This is a team to go, Google Creative Services. And if you even want to go a little bit further and you need support with the whole creative things, thinking about how to approach it, think about how to target, like even more advanced, we have a group of external trusted partners for YouTube, different creative agencies and stuff like that, that we can put you in touch with in order to build these campaigns. But it is key to keep these 3 points in mind, and then you can talk with your account manager to decide which of the 3 might be more suitable for you in each of the cases. And to wrap up, because I know that we are at time and we still have a few minutes where we need to cover this, we will go through the how basically to influence purchase decisions with behavioral science, how to build creatives that scale across borders. A few takeaways here, and we will go quickly. Again, you'll have access to all of this content, so no worries about it. But no news, the time that customers spend online has increased, and it's also allowed for international brands to be discovered by more customers. In fact, cross-border shopping, which basically users buying products from another market, has moved up, has increased 25%. It's more frequent now than ever. So this is a customer behavior that has changed and that has also created opportunities for brands like yours to succeed when they go digital. And this is when the messy middle comes here, and this is when it gets interesting, right? How do I go about it? How do I influence this process? Okay, there are customers that are buying online. They are interested in purchasing international brands. How do I go about it? So the first thing that we need to think about is that all purchases start with the exposure to the product and to the brand. This is what we call the trigger. And actually what happens between this trigger that you can see there in the red dot and the purchase, which is the end of the project, the process, is a messy middle. And this is when it starts to get messy, as the word says, right? And this is basically all of the touch points. And this is connecting back again to the search section that we were discussing about attribution and the complexity of the campaigns. There are many different touch points, And users can get in touch with your brand during this process through search, display, shopping, even social media, forums, YouTube, blogs. There's many different ways. And all of this affects this decision-making process, and it's actually going to decide whether this customer that got to know your brand in the trigger phase is actually going to become a process. And it is through behavioral science that we're going to be able to untangle this thread, this messy middle that you see in the design, and that we're going to actually have the creatives and the strategy that is going to enable you to succeed. Think about 6 cognitive biases here, and how you can apply behavioral science, again, to untangle this messy middle and to be as straightforward in this process as possible. There are 6 cognitive biases that influence the purchase decisions of users in this messy middle. And these biases, in a way, also help the customer to quickly make sense of all of this information that they have to capture and process in the messy middle. And what is also interesting is that these biases that you can see here also, in a way, can change our value proposition and creatives. And we have also found that they have also a very big influence in the customer behaviors. For instance, we have found that 63% of people on average, they change their preference from their favorite brand to a new brand they've never heard of, because this new brand they've never heard of followed certain biases and certain strategies and certain behavioral science patterns for them to be able to change their mind, change their usual purchase behavior, and switch to a new brand. So this is definitely a possibility if you play it as you should. Think, for instance, about the next slide here. Yeah, sorry, the first one, the previous one. Yeah, sorry. So here, for instance, you can think about when they're thinking about the first choice brand, right? The brand share in this case is 100%. They're only thinking about their favorite brand. They don't really acknowledge anything about any other brand. And it might be very, very difficult for you to get there. But we can get there. And this is when we can fill this gap, when we can fill this opportunity that we can see there, the yellow bar, with all of these cognitive biases that we were mentioning before, and we can get to the user more easily and basically compete, even if we are a brand that they have never heard of. But what are these biases actually? Like, how can we go about them? How can we apply them to get to this point and to fight for this user? In the next slide, we can see it very clearly. For instance, for the category heuristics, we can see the short descriptions, key product specification, having frequent asked questions, for instance, are key for users to change their mind. And this is where localization also gets very important, translating the content and making it relevant for each of the markets. But there are many, many different ways where we can go about it. For instance, about authority bias or social proof. If we think about having trusted local market payment options, this is when we're also gonna seem like a relevant player, someone that is worth buying from, some brand that is actually trustworthy. And this is where we're gonna get the authority from having strong partners in this market. Or think also about the power of free, another cognitive bias that we were describing before. Think about adding free gifts with a purchase, or a free sample, free delivery. All of these can be motivators, and you can play them in different ways, either from coupons or reimbursements to free deliveries. So it can be played in areas like payments or logistics. And then there's also another cognitive bias that is also very important for customers, which is the power of now, the immediacy. And this is something that has grown actually over the last few months, especially when customers have gone digital. And the longer you have to wait for a product, the weaker that the value proposition becomes, right? So you can think about quick delivery, very quick checkout, very smooth processes for the sale, quick download, great speed. And also, for instance, if a customer has an issue in the last section for customer experience, having a very quick way to contact your support team, or a very clear way to track the parcel number if you are going through a delivery, right? So all of these, no need to go in depth because you will have the content, are different ways where you can use these cognitive biases and behavioral science in areas like localization, payment, logistics, or customer experience in order to use them in your favor. And even though you might not be the first brand that comes to mind for this user in a new market, you can compete if you think about all of these ideas and all of these biases that you can play in your favor to access this market. There are some examples in the next slide, but for the sake of time, we will just go very quickly for them. This is actually a Spanish example from a Spanish company, and there's also one from the US. But you can see, for instance, the idea about joining thousands of clients. There is also the frequent asked questions added in the green part. There is also the idea of immediacy in a few minutes, what you can see there in the blue one. So you can see all of these biases that you were mentioning in very specific examples. If you take this into account when you build your creatives, when you build these ads, this is going to increase performance significantly. And it's actually going to allow you to compete for this click and grow your CTR much more easily than just asking for a lower return on investment or increasing your CPA. And you can do this on shopping as well in the following one. And again, this can be applied to all of the platforms that we have been discussing: search, shopping, or YouTube. Just keep in mind these biases and use them in your favor in your creatives in order to boost performance, have a stronger position, and make it very clear what the value proposition is for your clients. So in order to recap, I know there was a lot of content in the presentation, but I hope that it was useful. There's 4 main points that you should think about. Focus on performance in your marketing strategy, but do not forget about brand. Follow the 65-35% rule from the IPA in this new market, especially in the beginning. Please do think about branding, because this is the way where you're gonna be able to compete much better. Secondly, split your export budget based on different business objectives. Do not set a budget and then think, okay, let's see what we can get. Actually think about how much incrementality do we want to get from this market, and then follow the process that we said before. Follow this cost per acquisition strategy, whatever other strategy that you think about, and then get to the final estimated budget that you will need for that market. And then third, simplify the campaigns with automation as much as possible. Leverage smart bidding, leverage DSA, and test, basically, whatever works for you. And then last but not least, build creatives, as we said, based on behavioral science and the cross-border shopping preferences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Daniel. As you said, you've packed an awful lot in there. I salute your ability to squeeze a vast amount of information into a very short time. Due to the time, I'm going to suggest I'm actually going to move the slide on, because I can. You did really lovely job in terms of answering the questions we got as you went. Thank you very much for that, Daniel. Also, a reminder to everyone listening at the moment that you can also ask any additional questions after these sessions, particularly in the survey that we send out. So do ask that. Remember at the same time to set up that time, the meeting with your Google point of contact. Daniel spoke to that point, and Daniel spoke about the importance of that marketing test before we come to starting to think about peak as well. So again, timing is a kind of crucial now, as they always were. So look, Daniel, thank you very much for all of your insight and wisdom today. Daniel also mentioned the workbook, I think, as he was going there. Do take recourse to your workbook. Make sure you keep that up to date. Again, that will form an integral part of your ability to have a really rich and valuable discussion with your Google point of contact. On that note, just a reminder of what we've got on Thursday, and then next Tuesday, we are going to be looking at, on Thursday, we're going to be looking at what is required in terms of some of the investment to make our plan and our ambition come to life. And then again, the start of the following week is the final part of our journey, at least in terms of the formal content, where we'll start putting the finishing touches to our export plan. Until then, best of luck with everything. An awful lot to think about, I know, but we will see you on Thursday, ready to think about what kind of investment we are going to need to make in our success. Until then, have a great few days. See you on Thursday.